welcome back to All Things Money. I'm your host, David Blain. Thank you for joining us during this final segment of today's show. We talk a lot about college planning, and if you missed the first couple segments, head on over to our website, www.dlblain.com, and there in a week or so, we'll post an archived copy of this show. You can catch up. We've been talking about some ways to save for college. The past couple weeks, we've been talking about majors. You want to think about what kind of major you're going to pay for if you're going to go into debt for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Make sure it's a major that your child can actually earn some money and pay that debt back. Of course, we don't like to see parents on the hook for a lot of student loan debt. We've talked about that before. Maybe we'll have a chance to get into that today. But how can you use college to your benefit? You're the parent, you're shelling all this money for your child. Is there any benefit to you other than getting them out of the house and getting them a job? Well, one of my favorite strategies is to look into buying some sort of a condo or apartment for your child at college that they can use while they're there. Now, I've done a bunch of stories on this recently. In fact, I was interviewed for Financial Planning magazine back a couple weeks ago, and they did a whole article on college housing for clients' children and some of the strategies that we use. And I thought I would share that with you, the viewers and listeners. Financial Planning magazine is really an industry-type publication, so some of you may not have seen it. Some of this was picked up in the Wall Street Journal, but basically what the strategy is to look at your child, where they're going to school, and look at the housing situation and determine if it may be a good opportunity to pick up a property. Now, I'm going to use as an example here in eastern North Carolina, we have East Carolina University up in Greenville. So I'm going to use some examples from that. We've done this in other cities, but a lot of it depends on the individual college town. I know that when I went to Notre Dame, before I went to West Point, I went to Notre Dame, and at Notre Dame they required freshmen and sophomores to live on campus. And so you have to take that into consideration. What are the policies of the college as well? So anyway, when looking at your student going to college, you can look at living in the dorm or possibly living off campus. If there's a good, healthy, strong rental market, we would encourage you to look at the possibility of buying a condo for your child, having them and some friends live in it, the friends paying you rent during that time, and then when your child graduates from college, there are a couple ways to go. We've seen parents keep it as a rental. We've seen parents sell it to another parent. We've seen parents give it to the child to keep as a rental. There are a number of strategies once the child is done with school. Now, what we like to see is if you're going to do this, don't just put an ad on Craigslist, roommate wanted, and get your roommates that way. What we prefer to do is if your child is going to school, maybe some people from their high school are going there, some people that you know. Maybe you don't know them personally, but you know of the parents. The best strategy is if your child is in that condo with people that you kind of know, it really helps keep the problems down. Now, you want them to pay rent, and you've got to be very strict about the house rules. Make sure that you lay out the rules that are in effect so that you don't have a lot of parties, and you cannot allow any exceptions to that. You have to be a very strict landlord to minimize any problems that you have. But it can be a lucrative strategy if handled properly. We like to see a condo versus a house. A house can be a lot more maintenance and upkeep. They're also generally a little bit more expensive. And so we like the condo route. Go to the school, see where the popular places are for college, where the students want to live, what are convenient to the classes they have to go to or the facilities that the students have to go to, and look into those properties. We think looking at the combination of student housing, you got to factor in, okay, I got to pay for student housing anyway, and if you can purchase a property for the same, a lot of places it's not that much more when you factor in some rental coming in, or even if it's a little bit more, you have to factor in, can you actually make some money from this down the road when your student has moved on? Once again, once your child has moved on, there are several options. You can either keep it if it's doing very well. We would like to see you continue to rent it to people that you may have some affiliation with. What typically happens is you may know somebody that's a couple years younger than your child, and they start to stay in the house, and then they bring some of the people that they know in, so that you always have some sort of connection to the people. There's no question that the success of this strategy come down to the tenants, screening tenants, picking tenants that are going to pay the rent and not be overly destructive to the house. In terms of financing, we don't like to see tremendous leverage put on rental properties. We like to see a decent down payment. But around here, you can buy a good college housing type condo for, $120,000, $120,000, and we think there's an opportunity to get ahead on that. A couple of years ago, when there was the first-time home buyers credit was so rampant back in the recession, we even would have our clients that were over 18, we would have the parents gift the down payment to the child, or gift, if they had enough money to pay for it, and put it in the child's name to get the first-time home buyers credit. It was a great strategy. So that's just something to think about as you're sending your child off to college and looking at some way to maybe actually make some money from this. We think it's worthwhile to look at that. Now, if you've never owned a rental property or you have no interest in it, doesn't appeal to you, by all means don't do it. Owning physical real estate is not something that you want to just jump into if you don't feel like you have the time or effort to deal with it. If you're going to use a management company, of course the profits go way down. Most of the time with college, with your own child in there, living in there, most of the time, if you can or you have the aptitude, we would encourage the parents to handle it themselves. All right, well, that's about all the time we have for today's show. Once again, we wanted to talk a lot about college planning. We've got a few more things to look at. Maybe we'll look at next week about the do's and don'ts of getting into debt for college. So for All Things Money, I'm your host, David Blain. I hope that you'll come back again next week at the same time and the same stations.
The proceeding was a paid program. The opinions expressed are not necessarily those of WNBU and Inner Banks Media.